All right, folks, we are back here on WLTH 1370 AM. That's 92.7 in the FM dial. It is 6:37 in the PM here on March the 21st, the first day of spring. It's spring again. Yes, it is. Yes, the future is here and the future is now, and it is spring. I'm hoping it'll start acting like it pretty soon. Well, folks, this next topic is very, very serious. So I just want to give you a disclaimer. If you're a little bit squeamish, or if you have children around, you might want to use your discretion before I start this. But let me just say, there are a few celebrities in our culture who have had a more turbulent few years than the actor Jonathan Majors. The star of Hollywood blockbusters like Creed 3, Kang the Conqueror, and a lot of other stuff. The Last Black Man in San Francisco is what I know him from. And he's trying to regain his footing after being convicted of stalking and assaulting his ex-girlfriend in 2023. A backlash has led to him being dropped from lucrative roles in the Marvel series and his role as similarly troubled NBA Hall of Famer Dennis Rodman. His new movie, Magazine Dreams, hopefully will allow him to claw back some of the career momentum that he lost with his convictions and subsequent cancellation. But it is in the promotion for his new vehicle that he made a stunning admission, confessing that he had been the victim of sexual abuse from both men and women from the age of 9 years old. Yes, folks, you heard that right. 9 years old. In a new interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Major said that in addition to domestic violence program, after his conviction, he also underwent therapy which brought up childhood trauma he had not confronted, which makes him the latest in a long line of famous men who have admitted something that men, especially black men, don't like to acknowledge, which is the scourge of sexual abuse against young boys. I know so many fathers, so many parents who say, I don't want a man watching my kids. I don't want my kids, preschool teacher to be a man. Well, I don't want the babysitter to be a man. There's a lot of awareness about young girls being preyed upon, and for good reason. A lot of young girls are preyed upon by, perverted men, especially once they get past puberty. It's inevitable. It's unfortunate, but it is inevitable that you're going to have some, dirty old men trying to holler at your teenage daughter. That's just sort of what it is. Now, what we're seeing in this, disturbing trend among celebrities is that men who have lost their virginity as boys to older women often go on to have domestic and sexual abuse scandals once they become famous men. And it's hard to really do anything or say anything about it because in our society, we actually kind of celebrate it. That's the difference between the way we treat boys and the way we treat girls in this country. You hear a girl say that she's sexually active at 6 years old, everybody's ready to call the police. And rightfully so. But as you're about to hear with the late, great Ike Turner, the way it's treated is just like, it's just another thing. This is Ike Turner talking about how he lost his virginity with, of all people, Howard Stern.
This cat's had so many women.
He can't even keep straight.
Guess what age Ike Turner lost his virginity?
9.
Nope.
11.
6 years old.
No shit.
That's right.
6 years old, right? You were banging you were banging a 45-year-old when you were 6, right?
Yeah, that's right, man. You sure remember.
Yeah.
Remember, it was like he was there, yes.
It was a neighbor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's called child abuse. That's not called losing
No,
your
that's today they call it child abuse. But back then, it wasn't child abuse at all.
No.
That was 1937.
Well, now they call that molesting. Back then in your day, you called that making love, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I was having fun, you know.
Yeah.
And so was she.
Oh, man.
And for real,
6 years old? How could you make love to a 6-year-old boy?
Ooh.
ask Fred.
How old are you now?
Ask half the church.
So when you started at 6 years old, you were able to get a full arrest?
Yeah, man.
And you came and everything?
You damn right. Wouldn't you? I would say that you was, too.
Oh, absolutely. I would love it.
Yeah.
What did you do? Did you lie and tell her you were 8 so that she wouldn't feel funny about it?
No, I didn't tell her anything.
I mean, can you imagine, though?
You tell her the most you want.
Yeah, and you would climb on top of her and she taught you how to do it.
Yeah, she really taught me good, too.
So that's Ike Turner basically laughing off with Howard Stern his victimization. That is how most people look at sexual molestation when it's done by women against little boys. Now, if it had been a man, nobody'd be laughing about this. But since it was a woman, it's just like, yeah, I had a good time. She had a good time too. But we look at the complex figure that Ike Turner became in his life, and we see how, along with the trauma of watching his father get lynched by the Ku Klux Klan and all this other stuff, how this contributed to some of his later behavior. It's hard for male survivors of sexual abuse from women to process their abuse at the hands of women in a healthy way because of stuff like this. Because of the way our society views young boys, especially young black boys. I'm not saying white boys is any different or Hispanic boys, but our society already looks at black men as if we are sexual predators and just sexually voracious animal. That's how we've been marketed as black men since slavery. And so you get situations like this where Ike Turner sees no correlation whatsoever between his actions as a grown man and the things that happened to him when he was a little kid. And you just go like, man, dude. But there's been studies on this. Men who have been sexually abused during childhood reported higher attachment anxiety, suggesting that they feel insecure about their lovability and worth to their relationship partners. A study by Brassard from 2014, where they looked at the relationships between childhood sexual abuse and aggression later in life, specifically in relationships, found that CSA, which is childhood sexual abuse, indirectly predicted psychological and physical aggression. Anxious individuals perceived more situations as frustrating or potentially threatening because of their hypervigilance and worry about abandonment. But that sometimes they try to hold their anger in because it might lead to a relationship breakup. And in line with their findings, they suggested that anxiously attached men become overwhelmed by their emotions, both anxiety and anger, which impairs their judgment and their ability to control angry feelings, resulting in chaotic and violent expressions of anger. This could be the case, especially when one of the life historical causes of attachment anxiety was the sexually abusive behavior on the part of a trusted adult, like a neighbor in the case of Ike Turner. It really is unfortunate that as brilliant as that brother was, as brilliant as Ike Turner is, he will be known forever as the man who beat the crap out of Tina Turner. And you see that ultimately the unresolved trauma that he had in his life from childhood, being sexually molested, witnessing his father be lynched by the Ku Klux Klan, contributed to a lot of that volatility in his life. I'm not saying you can't hold him. He should have been held accountable for it. Of course, any man who puts his hand on a woman should be held accountable for it. But we have to look at these things when we're trying to prevent more Ike Turners from happening. And get these young boys, first of all, be vigilant about who we leaving these kids with. And if we find out these young boys have been touched by somebody, we got to get them some help ASAP so that they don't end up like this. Another person, Chris Brown. Chris Brown lost his virginity at the age of 8 to a grown woman. Eight years old. And now Chris Brown markets himself as this sexually voracious, almost, Lothario, I guess, who goes from woman to woman, who regularly, who's at some point apparently joined a gang as a celebrity, which, I mean, look, that's pretty embarrassing when you think about it. You're already famous and you decide you're going to join the Bloods or something, but that's his life. That's his choice. That's his business. I'm just saying, I didn't agree with it when Tupac did it either. Just being open and honest here. Now he markets himself as a Blood gang member and a sexually voracious Lothario, covered in tattoos, regularly getting accused of assaulting women and assaulting other people in the streets and threatening other artists and other people who don't agree with him. At what point do people in his life, what point should they have stepped in and said, particularly when he was young, while this was happening, while he was being sexually abused, because there is no such thing as losing your virginity at 8. If you're losing your virginity at 8, you were sexually abused. Even if it was somebody your age, it's still child-on-child sexual abuse. That is not the mental and physical maturity that you need to be having sex. I'm sorry, it's just not. There's no justification for it. Another person who claimed that he lost his virginity at the age of 8 was James Bond, Sean Connery, who later went on to say that women need to be slapped just to be kept in line in an interview with Barbara Walters some years ago that caused a huge amount of controversy. But to me, the celebrity I see that most signifies the damaging effect of sexual abuse to somebody's self-esteem and self-worth is Mike Tyson, who basically acknowledged how sexual abuse changed him as a young man.
I learned that don't mean that any less of a man because it happened.
Did you tell anyone at the time?
Hey, why are we sticking on this molestation thing?
Because I've never heard you talk about it.
Well, I never told anybody about it.
I don't want to dwell on something that makes you uncomfortable.
It doesn't make me uncomfortable, but it's just something that happened. It's not a big impact in my life.
You really believe that? Not a big impact?
No, I think I outgrew that during my fighting days.
You didn't carry that rage with you?
Could have, definitely. Definitely that, no doubt about it. If you put it in that perspective, yeah. Nobody's never gonna pick on me again.
So that's Mike Tyson talking about how a rage built up in him that he carried into the ring with him after he was sexually molested as a kid. And you see, I mean, You know, Mike Tyson, God bless him. I'm so proud that that brother is still here. I'm proud that he seems to be thriving, seems to be doing very well. He's got Tyson University. He got in very early in on the legal marijuana growing business, and that makes medicinal marijuana and recreational marijuana for people. He seems, everything I've heard, he seems to be doing very well financially. Just made a whole bunch of money with Jake Paul scamming the public with that fight that I refused to watch, but that's neither here nor there. But you see Mike Tyson, even with the high-pitched voice, with all the uncontrollable rage and the, you know, often an ability to control his emotions, you see the effect that these things had on Mike Tyson. You see that. You know, and I give him all the props in the world for talking about that, because, again, a lot of boys, particularly black men, don't want to talk about that. But this was the baddest man on the planet. Okay? Young kids today don't know. Mike Tyson was legitimately the baddest man on the planet in the late 80s, early 90s, before going to jail. And he's been willing to open up and admit that he was abused as a child, and that it had a huge effect on his life and his psyche. And we see that all the time. It makes so much of the way his life is gone make sense. You know, his volatile relationships with women, Robin Givens and others. You see that. And obviously, probably the figure most associated with depravity of and corruption of young people, particularly young girls now, is probably R. Kelly. R. Kelly has been probably more than anybody else, more than Harvey Weinstein, more than Bill Cosby, more than any of these famous men who've taken a fall, been sort of completely written off as somebody who is completely unsalvageable in any way. Because his sexual sins against particularly young girls is seen as unforgivable, and I fully understand people's you know, assertions in that way. But I think it's important to state that R. Kelly himself was a victim. This is how we end up with R. Kelly, the supposed monster, is R. Kelly, the victim. Initially, this is his brother, Carrie Kelly, talking about their sister. They were abused by their very own flesh and blood. Their very own flesh and blood. Their older sister. Isn't that something? You can't even, you can't even trust your own flesh and blood when it comes to these kids sometimes. And this is Carrie talking about the pain that him and his brother, Robert, known as R. Kelly, felt after being degraded by their own flesh and blood, their sister.
She told me to come in the room with her. And when I came in the room, she was in a robe.
Okay.
And she opened up her robe, and she didn't have anything on up under the robe. And she told me to come over to her. Excuse me. And as a kid, in my mind, I'm confused, because I know this is my sister. I'm 6. I know this wrong. Mm-hmm. And she's way older than me. And first I thought she was playing, but she would, she was insisting on me coming over to her. So I was hesitant, and so she grabbed my arm. Mm. And speaks to her. And when I did finally speak with her, she asked me, was Braille okay? She seen it on the news, and she's praying for him and things of that nature. And And she told me that I couldn't help but tell her, Teresa, I just want to tell you, I appreciate you calling, checking on my son, but I just want to let you know that I forgive you.
Oh. Take your time.
I forgive you for what you done to me. And the biggest blowback with that is we all human beings and nobody's perfect.
Yeah, so that's Carrie Kelly, the brother of R. Kelly, Robert Kelly, talking about the abuse that they suffered at the hands of their older sister. Their older sister was a teenage girl, and they were 6 and 8 years old. And so don't let anybody tell you that, oh man, you know, boys can't be victimized. They absolutely can be. And we see in somebody like R. Kelly, who even when he was free, even before people thought of him as this horrible monster who, you know, victimized young girls, there was always that inner turmoil. You know, you hate to say it, but it's one of the things that made his music so good. That he always had this inner turmoil between wanting to do good, always talking about God, talking about his mother, and talking about positivity, but he had a sex demon in him, you know, where he would go flip a switch and he would turn into this, this predator. You listen to Bump and Grind. One thing I always notice whenever we play on Bump and Grind, and I always hear he said, "Now I don't want to hurt nobody. I don't want to hurt nobody." Why are you associating sex with hurting somebody? Because somebody hurt him. Somebody hurt him. His sister hurt him. And then we see him act out on somebody like Aaliyah, who he married when she was 15 years old and he was 27. At first, I just didn't believe it was true. I couldn't believe it. I was a little kid at the time. I was probably maybe I was at Emerson. I think maybe I was in elementary school. I went to school with one of his cousins, and her father and my mother used to talk a lot of times when we'd have our little performances or whatever. And he would say, they were R. Kelly's cousin actually. They were his cousins, and they told us, yeah, R. Kelly and Aaliyah are married now. And I just was like, that's just ridiculous. That's just not possible. And then you see it on the news, you go, oh my God, they were telling the truth. This man actually went out and married Aaliyah. This man acted out his trauma on Aaliyah. Now again, that don't mean that he should be given a pass for that. He is where he belongs. I will say that about R. Kelly. He is where he belongs currently. But again, how do you stop from making more R. Kellys? You make sure you get to them before they can have more Aaliyahs. That's what you do. You get to them beforehand. You get them some counseling. You get them some help. You got to start getting these young boys and even a lot of these men help who are struggling, who are suffering, who are dealing with this. And again, our society does not make it easy to come forward with this, because everybody, if you say you're molested by a man, people start questioning your masculinity and you're soft, you're a punk, you're gay. If you say you're molested by a woman, people go, man, come on, shut up, dude. You enjoyed it, There was just a story here in the state of Indiana, somewhere downstate, about this teacher who, forced her students to have sex with her. and act out her sick fantasies and fetishes. These boys are, I think, 13 or something. You know, we really have to watch who we are bringing and allowing around children, folks. We really do. Watch who you let around your kids. Make sure that you talk to your kids about this. Let them know that nobody is to touch their private areas, and they are to not touch anybody else's private areas, and nobody's allowed to touch them and kiss on them and do all that stuff to them. Their body is theirs. Nobody's allowed to touch them. And if they have been touched, we got to start getting them some help. Legitimately. We have to start getting these people help and stop waiting for the end outcome. Stop waiting until they become R. Kelly. Stop waiting until they become Ike Turner or Mike Tyson, Chris Brown, Jonathan Major. Stop waiting. Don't wait. Get them some help. Let me get this caller. Hello, caller. What's up?
Okay, good evening, Scott. How you doing?
It's all good, brother.
Now, Scott, let's back up and go all the way back. Let's start back. We're going to start with Solomon and Gomorrah, okay?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to come all the way back to him. Now, but we know it goes deeper than Solomon and Gomorrah. But, Scott, this crazy foolishness been going on with little baby and little children. Look, when the good Lord was on the first, it was going on.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying to you?
Yeah.
This child molested, this child raping, a man with man, woman with woman. Look, man, homosexual. Look, all through the Bible. Just read it. That's been going on since the beginning of time. So people been killed, people been in prison. God. So how do we stop it? Look, the good Lord was on the earth. It's probably been look, man. This been going on for so long. When Lot, look, this was on earth when Lot was on the earth. You remember Sodom and Gomorrah, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do it stop? God, how do it stop?
We got it. Right. We got to, first of all, we got to make sure that people aren't able to act out on children. That's what we got to do. We got to stop. We got to make sure they're not able to act out.
You're 1,000% right. You're 100,000% right. The good Lord was on this earth, and he could not stop these fools. It was on this earth when the good Lord was here. So what can mankind do? And God is God all by himself.
Well,
so what mankind do? Huh?
Well, we have, again, we as people, we prevent things a lot of times. We have things, like I said, all places aren't equally debauched at all times. You know what I mean? People can get better. People can change. People can get better. People can recognize that their behavior is wrong and stop doing it or not do it. People absolutely can change.
Remember Lot in the Bible?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Remember how Solomon and Gomorrah walked back then?
Mm-hmm.
Look, now, if they with God on the earth, all the way back there with the good Lord, man is so confused. In other words, Satan got people all messed up. That's all what I'm getting at, good man.
Yeah.
People's all messed up. I don't know how much more to say. Look, you see how they did the good Lord? They killed him.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm saying everything you are saying this evening, I'm agreeing with you 1,000%. But it's just that the human mind, human nature, it's just all messed up. I don't know how much. I don't know what more to say.
All right, now, brother. Thank you for your call. I got another caller. Hello, caller.
Hi, Scott. How you doing?
What's up?
You know what? I think too. You have to really kind of teach your children that their body is private. Mm-hmm. And I remember I used to tell my children, nobody, absolutely nobody, is to look, under your clothes. Mm-hmm. Nobody.
Right.
Absolutely nobody. And you have to teach that to your children. And then if somebody try that, make sure that they know how they can tell somebody. Don't keep that stuff to yourself. Right. Tell somebody. They need to be able to tell. And then parents got to be able to listen to their children. Because sometimes parents don't even pay attention. Mm-hmm. Oh, that didn't happen. They didn't do that. But you got to be able to listen to your children if your children tell you something like that, because that's just utterly ridiculous. And you know what? Remember, there was a teacher who was going with one of her students, and she even had a baby by one. You remember that?
Yeah. Mary Kay Letourneau.
Yeah, had a baby
very
by
famous.
and then end up married.
Yep.
These people are, some of these people, you know what? Some of these people really need to be put in jail, seriously.
Yeah.
For what they do to children. Because she should have went to jail. That woman should have went to jail. But
She did. She actually went to prison, got out, and molested the boy all over again.
So that did help her.
Yeah.
Okay, but something need to be done, you know, for these people that do that to children. Anybody that do that to a child, really, they, you know, because, you know what, I look at it like this, Scott. There is too many women and too many grown-ups who are willing to just give it up. So why would you have to fool with children?
Right.
Whether it's a man or a woman.
Absolutely.
Because there's too many of them out here just giving it up anyway.
Yeah.
So that's my comment on that. Scott.
Thank you for calling.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah, the case of Mary Kay Letourneau very much was a huge thing in the 90s when I was a little kid, growing up in the 90s. Mary Kay Letourneau was married. She was a married teacher, and she had a whole husband and I think 2 or 3 kids that were teenagers, and she actually started an affair or molesting her. I think he was 11 years old. I want to say he was 11, 12 years old. And she was in her 30s, maybe 40s. And it became a huge scandal in this country, and it was all over TV for a long time. It really was. It was something that would be on 2020 and all those news shows, and at the time, you know, being in more unenlightened times like the 90s, it was seen as, you know, you'd hear a lot of late night comedians, "Oh boy, that kid is lucky. That kid is lucky." You know, she changed his life. You know, they ended up having 2 or 3 children together. They got married. They stayed together for, I think, about 20 years, if I'm not mistaken. They did eventually divorce when I think the young man was in his early 30s, early mid-30s or something. And she ended up dying of cancer right after they got divorced. But that woman took that boy's childhood. She really did. She took his childhood. He was a father at like 13, 14 years old. Nobody deserves that. Nobody wants that. Nobody needs that. And then she goes to jail, gets out, and gets caught with him again and thrown back in jail for an even longer time. She gets out after a few more years, and they get married. And in our culture, it was like, oh, well, you know, they at least loved each other. No! This dude was a victim. That woman was sick. And when you look into her background, I actually saw a documentary about her. Her father was a sicko, which is how she ended up in that predicament. Her father actually did something. I think he got accused of rape or sexual assault or something, and it ripped their family apart. And so she revisited that on the next person. It's almost like a virus or something. Somebody victimizes you or messes with you, and then you mess with somebody else, passing it on. You know. And this is why it is important, like the caller said, you have to teach your kids that their privates are their privates, their body is their body. Nobody is to touch you in those places. It is important for young kids to know that they have bodily autonomy. And we got to start locking up a lot of these adults and making sure that they you know, aren't able to have access to young people, to corrupt more generations of young people. Even women, not just men, women as well, when they act out on children. 6 years old and 45, that is disgusting. Period. And the worst part about it is Ike Turner's up there laughing about it, joking about it. I had such a good time. Dude, you have no idea. You have no idea. Your victims don't have an idea, but you don't. All right, folks. I know this was a very heavy topic. But I always like to do these type of topics because they are important in our community. I told you guys some, probably a few weeks ago at this point, about a kid I went to school with at Marquette who, you know, his own brother used to tease him about being sexually molested by their uncle. He'd make a joke, he'd make a spectacle out of his own little brother. He thought that little of the seriousness of that he would make fun of his own little brother in front of everybody. And we just sit there and laugh, and because we didn't know how serious that was. And it's unfortunate to say. So I know that there's people walking around Gary right now who are victims, who need to be healed. And it's up to you. Once you get to a certain age, you know, it's not up to your parents, it's not up to your teachers or anybody else. Only you can fix you. All right, folks. We got to get this break. It's 7:14. Oh, my God. I got to go to this break. I'm sorry, caller. I got to go to the Happy Happies after this. We'll be right back after these.